You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about the dark story behind Lena Zavaroni. So it's over to you now, Mark, for this week's chilling episode.
In the 1970s, at the age of just 10 years old, Lena Hilda Zavaroni, a young Scottish singer and television show host, had the world at her feet. With her 1974 debut album, Ma, He's Making Eyes at Me, making the UK top 10, which in turn made her the youngest singer and artist to ever have an album that high up in the UK charts, which is a position that she still holds today. As Lena Zavaroni's success grew, she starred in her own television series, made numerous TV guest star appearances, and appeared on stage singing with big names at the time like Frank Sinatra, Lucille Ball, Morecambe and Wise, and even performed at the White House for the US President, Gerald Ford. However, things took a turn for the worse when the young teenage starlet at the tender age of just 15 years old suffered from anorexia, and as a consequence, by the age of 15, she developed clinical depression. Also, in 1989, Lena Zavaroni's mother, Hilda Zavaroni, died of a tranquilizer overdose, and a house fire destroyed all of her show business memorabilia. Then, in 1999, whilst being forced to live on just state benefits, she was accused of stealing a 50p packet of jelly. However, the charges were later dropped. And on the 1st of October in 1999, following an operation to cure her depression, Lena Zavaroni sadly died at the age of 35 from pneumonia. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in once again and listening to this very sad episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a psychic medium, a ufologist, and an avid true crime buff. And just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every Monday night I do a podcast on the various subjects under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, and missing people. So if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any other podcast platform, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the heartbreaking tale surrounding the dark story behind Lena Zavaroni, and this week's necessary disclaimer. I will be doing this podcast in two halves, with the first half of the episode mainly being the positive side of Lena's talents, and in the second half I will be dealing with themes like depression, suicide and eating disorders, especially in a teenager, so may prove upsetting to some. Listener discretion is advised. I will, of course, let you, the listener, know before the second half of the podcast starts. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case still remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, I somehow still seem to have managed to get it passed by the social media censors. Anyway, let's get back to the story. Lena Zavaroni was born on the 4th of November 1963 in Greenock, Renfrewshire, and grew up in a small town of Rothesay on the Isle of Bute. Greenock itself is a town in Inverclyde, located in the west central lowlands of Scotland and the Isle of Bute. The Isle of Bute, where Lena Zavaroni grew up, is an island on the Firth of Clyde in Scotland, in the United Kingdom, which is divided into highland and lowland areas by the Highland Boundary Fault. The Isle of Bute itself was formerly a constituent island of the larger county of Bute, but is now part of the council area of Argyll and Bute. Are you with me so far?
Yeah, I think so.
Good, because there's more. The Isle of Bute's resident population in 2011 was 6,498, which is a decline of just over 10% from the figure of 7,228 that was recorded in 2001 against a backdrop of Scottish island populations, which grew by 4% during that same period. Evidence of an early occupation on the Isle of Bute exists in the form of cairns or mountain ranges at the north end of the island, such as the Long Cairn of Cairnbarn and the White Cairn at Lenhulin Wood. Other prehistoric structures which are to be found on the island are the Fort Complex at Donegal and the Kingarth Sun Circle, or Stone Circle, estimated to be around 3,000 years old. And one well-known artefact on the island of Bute is the Queen of the Inch necklace, which is an article of jewellery made of jet, which is a type of lignite, or the lowest rank of coal or gemstone, found in a cist or small gravestone that dates from circa 2000 BC. Both of Lena Zavaroni's parents, Victor and Hilda Zavaroni, who also owned a fish and chip shop on the Isle of Bute, had a musical ear, with her father being able to play the guitar and her mother who could sing. Lena Zavaroni began singing at the tender age of just 2 years old, which is pretty good going really, because my special gift at that age was squashing bugs. She would continue through her young age, whilst on the island, to entertain her friends and family by putting on makeshift shows in the front room with her younger sister, Carla. And according to her cousin, Margaret Zavaroni, Lena would also spend time, in between makeshift shows, doing normal child activities, like going to the winter gardens, the fun fair, or the beach. Come forward a few years to the summer of 1973, and 9-year-old Lena Zavaroni is discovered by the record producer called Tommy Scott, who happened to be holidaying in her hometown of Rothesay, and heard her singing in a band that consisted of her father, Victor, and her uncle, whose name, unfortunately, I can't seem to find. Tommy Scott then contacted the impresario, a Mr. Phil Solomon. On a couple of interesting side notes, just to help you keep up with the story, Tommy Scott was a Scottish songwriter, producer and singer in the 1960s and 1970s who had numerous hits in pop, rock and folk, including records with bands like Them, The Dubliners, Sydney Devine, Twinkle, and of course Lena Zavaroni. Phil Solomon, on the other hand, was a music executive and businessman from Northern Ireland who managed artists like The Bachelors. Phil Solomon also founded the Northern Irish record label Major Minor Records and was a co-director of the British radio station that was founded in 1964 called Radio Caroline. This phone call from Tommy Scott to Phil Solomon then, in turn, after much decisions between the two men, led to his partner, Dorothy Solomon, becoming Lena Zavaroni's manager. After this first short break, in part 2, we will look at how Lena Zavaroni became the unknown little girl from a Scottish island to a megastar working with heavyweight talent from both the UK and the States, and take a closer look at the illness called anorexia nervosa.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could and has taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99. to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
It's now 1974, and the 10-year-old Lena Zavaroni is now hitting the big time. After her jaw-dropping performances on the UK TV programme called Opportunity Knocks, which she won in an amazing record-breaking 5 weeks in a row, she was then signed up to record an album, which was eventually titled after one of her hit songs, Ma, He's Making Eyes at Me. The album itself was mainly a collection of classic and then recent pop songs like Swinging on a Star, Pennies from Heaven, and a cover of John Denver's Country Roads. Ma, He's Making Eyes at Me reached number 8 in the album chart, and because of this chart position, Lena Zavaroni remains the youngest person, at 10 years and 146 days old, to have an album in the UK top 10, which is a distinction that she still holds today. On an interesting side note, the UK TV programme Opportunity Knocks, where Lena got her big break, was a British television and radio talent show which originally ran from 1949 to 1978 and was hosted by the late Hughie Green, who was an English radio and television presenter, game show host and actor. Opportunity Knocks had a late 1980s revival hosted by the comedian Bob Monkhouse, and again later by a previous winner of the show, another comedian named Les Dawson. The show provided a platform to fame for acts like Spike Milligan and Frankie Vaughan, and was one of the most popular shows on British television, with a weekly audience figure of 20 million viewers. Lena Zavaroni, with her amazing voice, sparkling personality and huge talent, had, quite deservedly I feel, conquered the UK, so the next step was the States. She sang at the 1974 Hollywood charity show with big names like Frank Sinatra and Lucille Ball, at which Lucille Ball said about her, and I quote,
"You're special, very special and very, very good."
Although some sources, but I'm not sure who, do attribute the words to Frank Sinatra. Personally, I don't think it really matters which of the two megastars said it, because to get a compliment like that from either Sinatra or Ball is a fantastic achievement anyway. Following the Hollywood charity gig, in 1975, Lena Zavaroni then guest starred on the Carol Burnett Show, which was then followed by a guest appearance on The Tonight Show. And a year later, in 1976, she sang for President Gerald Ford at the White House, and then went on to have her own TV show, all whilst performing live around the world, which included her performing on Broadway. And then, while she was still in the United States, she signed up to the soul-orientated Stax Records label. However, despite all the publicity, praise, television appearances and the big names that she performed with, Lena Zavaroni was not especially successful in America, with her Ma He's Making Eyes at Me album not entering the American charts and its title single only reaching number 91 on the US Billboard Hot 100 during a 4-week chart run in the summer of 1974. She was a busy girl, as while she was working hard in the States and various other parts of the world, she would occasionally come back to the UK to do guest appearances, which included gigs like The Morecambe and Wise Show, an episode of The Wheel Tappers and Shunters Social Club, and the 1976 Royal Variety Show. And if you were old enough or young enough to watch 1970s television in the UK, you would understand that those shows were big viewing at the time. While attending London's Italia Conti Academy Stage School, Lena Zavaroni met and became a long-term friend with another young star called Bonnie Langford. On an interesting side note, Bonita Langford, is an English actress, dancer and singer who came to prominence as a child star in the 1970s when she had the notable role of Violet Elizabeth Bott in the TV series Just William, with the ever-remembered phrase, and I quote, over to you, Linda.
"I'll scream and scream and scream until I'm fit."
In the 1980s, Bonnie Langford played companion Mel Bush in Doctor Who, a role she returned to in the 2020s. And from 2015 to 2018, she played Carmel Kazemi on the BBC soap opera EastEnders, for which she received the 2016 British Soap Award for Best Newcomer. Both Lena Zavaroni and Bonnie Langford, in the September of 1978, starred in their own ITV special. Then the BBC broadcast Lena in her own show called Lena Zavaroni on Broadway, which was chosen for the 1978 Golden Sea Swallow Festival, where it won the Silver Award. And from 1980 to 1982, she was given her own TV series on the BBC simply titled Lena Zavaroni and Music. During the first part of this podcast, I tried to concentrate on Lena Zavaroni's positive experiences because I feel she deserves to be remembered for her talents. In this second half, I'm going to be looking at her struggles with mental health and her anorexia. I'm pointing this out halfway through the show to give you, the listener, the chance to decide whether you want to listen to how her life changed or if you want to stop here. If you do carry on listening, I think it's only fair to warn you that I will be touching on some triggering subjects, so listener discretion is advised. So, first, what is anorexia nervosa? Before I go into the answer, I think it's only fair for me to point out that I am not a doctor and I have no medical training whatsoever, although I think most of you listeners are probably already aware of that fact. So, the information I have gathered is from various medical websites. The term anorexia itself is of Greek origin, which literally translates to a loss of appetite, and of itself does not have any harmful connotations. It is the adjective of the term nervosa that indicates the functional and non-organic nature of the disorder. Anorexia nervosa, which is often referred to simply as anorexia, is an eating disorder characterised by food restrictions, body image disturbance, the fear of gaining weight, and an overpowering desire to be thin. Some individuals with anorexia nervosa have a fear of being overweight or being seen as overweight, even though they are in fact typically underweight. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or otherwise known as the DSM-5, describes the perceptual symptoms of anorexia nervosa as, and I quote,
disturbance in the way in which one's body weight or shape is experienced.
And in research and clinical settings, this symptom is often called body image disturbance. Individuals with anorexia nervosa may often deny that they have any problems with low weight. They may weigh themselves frequently, eating only small amounts of food, and when they do eat, there are only certain foods that they will consume. Some patients of anorexia nervosa exercise excessively and force themselves to vomit, or what medical experts call anorexia purging, and use laxatives to lose weight and or binge eat to control their body shapes. Some patients in extreme cases of anorexia nervosa who continually refuse significant dietary intake or weight restoration interventions and are declared to lack the capacity to make a decision by a psychiatrist may end up being force-fed under restraints via a nasogastric tube, but only after asking the patient's parents or guardians to make the decision for them. Medical complications of anorexia nervosa may include osteoporosis, infertility, heart damage, and the cessation of menstrual periods, which is often developing during adolescence or in the young adult years. The causes of anorexia nervosa are very varied and may differ from individual to individual, with cultural factors appearing to play a role. And additionally, it appears to occur more commonly among those youngsters that are involved in activities that value thinness, such as high-level athletics, modelling, or dancing. However, anorexia nervosa can also often develop following a major life-changing or stress-inducing event. Looking at some interesting figures here, and anorexia nervosa is estimated to occur in 0.3% to 4.3% of women and 0.2% to 1% of men over the Western countries at some point in their life. and about 0.4% of young women are affected by it each year, with it being estimated to occur 10 times more commonly among women than men. In 2013, anorexia nervosa directly resulted in about 600 deaths globally, which is up from 400 deaths in 1990. And about 5% of people with anorexia nervosa die from complications over a 10-year period. Eating disorders, which include anorexia nervosa, increases a person's risk of death from a wide range of other causes, including suicide. After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at how depression and anorexia nervosa affected Lena Zavaroni's life and career.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk. Or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
It was from the age of 13 that Lena Zavaroni suffered from the eating disorder anorexia nervosa. And while she was at the London Italia Conti Academy stage school, Lena's weight dropped to just 4 stone, which is the equivalent of 25 kilograms or 56 pounds. I did check out the average weight for a girl of 13, and according to Google, she should have weighed just over 7 stone at least. Lena Zavaroni blamed this weight loss on the pressure that was placed upon her to fit into the various costumes, while at the same time developing as a woman. While she was doing the various shows for stage and TV in London, Lena, as I mentioned earlier, was staying with Dorothy Solomon, who was the partner of music executive and businessman Phil Solomon, with Dorothy becoming Lena Zavaroni's manager. A close cousin of Lena's, a lady called Margaret Zavaroni, in an interview with the Sunday Post in the February of 2022, said of her, and I quote,
"It wasn't easy to keep in touch with her."
Margaret Zavaroni continues, and again I quote,
"She would phone home when she felt homesick. The only time I really got to see her in that period was when I went down to London. She was very homesick and her manager, Margaret Solomon, asked me to come down. I think it helped her a wee bit.
Throughout the 1980s, Lena tried a couple of times to rekindle her singing career. However, unfortunately at the same time, she continued to struggle with her anorexia nervosa, with the illness eventually killing her singing career altogether. And as the 1980s progressed, Lena Zavaroni's health issues left her looking gaunt and frail, and with her parents separating, which finally ended up in a divorce. There was one happy moment, though, when in 1989, and in a bid to try and have a normal life, Lena Zavaroni married a computer consultant named Pete Wiltshire, and the couple settled in their new home located in North London. However, according to her cousin, Margaret Zavaroni, and I quote,
"That was a no-no from the beginning."
And unfortunately, the couple separated just 18 months later. Also in 1989, tragedy struck for Lena when Lena's mother, Hilda Zavaroni, died of a tranquilizer overdose. And then a home fire destroyed all of her show business mementos. Her cousin, Margaret Zavaroni, first became aware of Lena's fight with anorexia nervosa when she was just 13 years old. She told the Sunday Post in 2022, and I quote,
"She was in the Royal Infirmary and I went to see her."
She continues, and again I quote,
"She'd gone to the Italia Conti School in London, and I think it started when she was there. They were all dancing in front of mirrors, trying to stay slim. It was a good school to go to, and she did well, and they were all sorry she developed anorexia. They tried their best."
Margaret Zavaroni also told the Sunday Post, and again I quote,
"The illness ruined her career. She had everything going for her, and people loved her."
After the breakup of her marriage, Lena then moved to Hoddesdon in Hertfordshire so she could be nearer to her father, Victor, and his second wife. Although by this time Lena Zavaroni, that huge teenage star that once was now living on state benefits. And, as if things couldn't get any lower for her, in 1999 she was accused of stealing a 50p packet of jelly. However, the charges were later dropped. In the September of 1999, Lena Zavaroni was admitted to the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff for a psychosurgical operation, or, in layman's terms, brain surgery performed to treat psychiatric disorders. Lena underwent various drug treatments and received electroconvulsive therapy in a desperate attempt to end her depression. Sorry about that. On an interesting side note, electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT for short, is a psychiatric treatment during which a generalised seizure without muscular convulsions is electrically induced to manage refractory mental disorders. Typically 70 to 120 volts are applied externally to the patient's head, resulting in approximately 800 milliamperes of direct current passing between the electrodes for a duration of 100 milliseconds to 6 seconds, either from temple to temple or from front to back on one side of the head. Electroconvulsive therapy is often used as an intervention for major depressive disorder, mania, autism and catatonia. The usual course of ECT involves multiple administrations, especially given 2 or 3 times per week, until the patient no longer has symptoms. Lena Zavaroni begged the doctors to operate on her so as to relieve her depression. And although she was fully aware that the psychosurgical operation would not cure her anorexia nervosa, she was still desperate for the operation to proceed, so much so that she even threatened suicide if it didn't go ahead. So on the 7th of September 1999, the operation took place and was described by the surgeons as pioneering. I feel I should point out here that although some reports claim that the surgery Lena Zavaroni had was a lobotomy, the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff said that it was not, and that the treatment she was given was intended for depression rather than anorexia nervosa, which is what was rumoured at the time. According to various reports, after Lena had gone through the operation, she appeared to be in satisfactory condition, and after a week she was, and I quote,
making telephone calls, cheerful and engaging in conversation.
She even asked her doctor if he thought there was any chance that she would be able to get back on stage and start to sing again. However, 3 weeks after the operation, Lena contracted pneumonia, which saw her weight drop to less than 5 stone, and then, sadly at the age of 35, on the 1st of October 1999, she passed away from bronchial pneumonia. Lena Zavaroni's funeral took place at the Roman Catholic Church of St Augustine in Hoddesdon, Hertfordshire, on the 15th of October 1999, and she was buried later that day at Hoddesdon Cemetery. One of Margaret Zavaroni, Lena's cousin's, final words to the Sunday Post was, and I quote,
Lena never got the chance to grow up as a woman. All her teenage life she was working, doing 2 shows a night in Blackpool or Morecambe or places like that. She never had a chance to go out with other girls to a disco.
I'll be the first to admit that I was never really a big fan of Lena Zavaroni's music. I mean, don't get me wrong. I always thought she was very talented and had a fantastic voice, but in the mid to late 70s, I was listening to albums like the Sex Pistols' Nevermind the Bollocks, or similar tracks like Friggin' in the Riggin' from the great rock and roll swindle. But I was always fascinated by her life story, in that for someone so young, at the age of 10, to have had such a huge spotlight shone on them literally on the world stage, and then to lose everything in such a devastating way, losing her health to an awful eating disorder, her mother to a tranquilizer overdose, and then losing all her show business memorabilia to a house fire. I think for someone to have coped with all that loss in the space of just a couple of years, to me anyway, shows she had a strong sense of character. And to be honest, I personally feel that if she was still alive today, although she might not be the big star that she used to be, she would still be singing, dancing and entertaining, but not just to all her fans, but to a new, younger generation of ears who just like to listen to a good tune. I hope that this episode will help people remember not just her mental health issues and with anorexia nervosa, but the amazing little star that she was, although to a lot of her fans around the world, she still is.
If you or anyone you know suffers from any eating disorders, we will be putting contact details and helpline numbers in the description of this show on all social media posts. thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 118, we are going to be looking at the torture and murder of Sylvia Marie Likens. Sylvia Marie Likens was an American teenager living in Indianapolis, Indiana, who was tortured and murdered by her caregiver, Gertrude Baniszewski, and many of Baniszewski's children, along with several of their neighbourhood friends. The abuse that Sylvia Marie Likens endured lasted for 3 months, occurring incrementally before she died from her extensive injuries and malnourishment. The torture and murder of Sylvia Likens is widely regarded by Indiana citizens as the worst crime ever committed in their state, and has been described by a senior investigator in the Indianapolis Police Law Enforcement as the most sadistic case he had ever investigated in the 35 years he served with the Indianapolis Police.
This show was written and researched by me, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Pooler, with special thanks to Neil Packer and the staff of the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And of course a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters and any other sorts of paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message and I'll see what I can do. I'll also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end credits of the podcast as a thank you. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.